In 1816, summer failed. Across Europe and North America, people waited for warmth that never truly came. The sun rose, but the air stayed cold. Crops struggled. The skies looked strange, and frosty days returned in summer months, when it should have been impossible. In June, snow fell in places like New England, USA. In July, their fields still froze. And in August, the harvest hopes collapsed. At first, people reached for familiar explanations. Bad luck, a local weather shift, a cruel season. But this was not local. It was not ordinary. It was a global climate shock. And it began the year before, on a distant island most of the world had never heard of. In April 1815, Mount Tambora erupted on the Indonesian island of Sumbawa. The explosion was colossal. It was one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in recorded history. The mountain did not simply burst. It tore itself apart. Ash and gas were blasted high into the atmosphere. Entire villages were destroyed. Tsunamis spread across nearby coasts. The sound of the eruption traveled astonishing distances. Locally, the damage was catastrophic, but Tambora's greatest impact was not limited to Indonesia. The eruption injected vast amounts of sulfur-rich material into the stratosphere. There, it spread around the globe. And once those particles circled the Earth, they began to change the climate itself. Volcanoes do not usually cool the planet. Most eruptions are too small. Their ash falls quickly. Their effects stay regional. Tambora was different. Its particles rose high enough to remain suspended in the upper atmosphere. There, they reflected sunlight back into space. Less sunlight reached Earth's surface. Temperatures fell. Weather patterns shifted. The result was subtle at first, then devastating. The year 1816 became known as the year without a summer. This did not mean there was no summer at all. It meant summer never behaved as it should. Warmth became unreliable. Seasons broke rhythm. Agriculture, which depends on timing, began to fail. For farming societies, the climate is not the background. It is survival. A few degrees matter. A late frost matters. A wet season matters. A dimmed sky matters. In 1816, crops failed across large parts of Europe. Grain yields fell. Food prices rose sharply. Hay ran short. Livestock suffered. In parts of Switzerland, Germany, and France, the situation became desperate. There were bread shortages, food riots, growing hunger. In North America, farmers in New England watched summer snow destroy confidence in crops alike. Corn failed. Wheat struggled. Families reconsidered where they could survive. The climate shock did not affect everyone equally. That is how such events always work. Some regions endured scarcity. Others saw migration. Some had reserves. Others had none. The weather became the same story told in very different lives. Tambora changed more than the temperature. It changed the sky. Across the world, people reported unusual light. Sunsets became deeper, redder, and more dramatic. The atmosphere took on a strange haze. The world looked wrong. For people living through it, this mattered. Climate is not only felt through crops and cold, it is also seen. A dimmed sun, a lurid horizon, a season that looks unfamiliar. These changes unsettled people because they hinted at something larger than daily weather, something planetary. But in 1816, there were no satellites, no global climate models, no modern atmospheric science. People saw the effects, but they could not yet see the full cause. One of the strangest consequences of 1816 happened indoors. That year, in Switzerland, a group of writers gathered near Lake Geneva. Bad weather trapped them inside. The days were cold, wet, and unnaturally dark. Among them was Mary Shelley. Confined by the stormy atmosphere, challenged to invent a ghost story, she began writing what would become Frankenstein. This detail matters not because Tambora caused the novel directly, but because climate shapes culture as well as crops. A failed summer altered mood, movement, imagination, and time itself. The environment did not just change what people could grow, it changed what they created. That is one of the quieter lessons of climate shocks. Their consequences reach far beyond the obvious. The year without a summer also pushed people across maps. In North America, repeated crop failures helped drive migration westward. If land could no longer be trusted in one region, families sought another. Climate does this. It rearranges geography through human decisions, not instantly, not always dramatically, but steadily. A failed season becomes a failed farm. A failed farm becomes movement. Movement becomes demographic change. This is how environmental events reshape history without always appearing in political narratives. The weather changes first, then the human map follows. It would be easy to treat 1816 as a historical curiosity, a bizarre year, a volcanic accident, an atmospheric oddity, but that would miss the point. The year without a summer shows how fragile civilization can be when climate shifts suddenly. It shows how tightly food, stability, prices, movement, and mood are linked to environmental conditions. It also shows something else. Human systems often look strong until the natural world changes the terms. In 1816, there was no industrial global grid to fail, no satellites to lose, no digital networks to collapse, and yet the consequences were still profound. That should make the modern world pause. Because if a single volcanic eruption could distort seasons across the planet in the early 19th century, then climate has always held more power over human life than societies prefer to admit. Tambora did not permanently change the world's climate. The cooling faded, the skies cleared. The atmosphere gradually returned toward normal. But temporary does not mean trivial. A one-year disruption can alter harvests, prices, migration, disease, and culture. A short shock can leave a long shadow. That is what makes 1816 so compelling. It was not the end of the world, it was a reminder. A reminder that stability is often assumed, not guaranteed. And that human history is shaped not only by kings, wars, inventions, and ideas, but by sunlight, ash, temperature, and timing. The year without a summer was not just a weather event. It was a moment when the climate interrupted civilization. Fields failed, skies changed, people moved, stories emerged, and the world was forced, briefly, to live by different rules. History often remembers human decisions. But sometimes, the turning point begins with a mountain, an atmosphere, and a season that never arrives. Join us every Sunday for deeper stories, bigger questions, and long-form explorations that go beyond the short videos. Because knowledge doesn't stop at 60 seconds.
Thanks for watching. This is 60-second knowledge now extended, because curiosity doesn't stop at 60 seconds. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok.